You can spend years learning how to hide from human eyes. You can master camouflage, terrain masking, underground shelters and silent movement. But there is a modern threat that ignores all of that skill instantly. A threat that doesn't care how well your shelter blends in or how carefully you've chosen your location. It sees something else entirely. Heat. In today's world, thermal imaging has become cheap, widespread, and devastatingly effective. A trained operator can detect a human presence from hundreds of meters away through foliage, light structures, and even shallow earth cover. What most people don't realize is that many hidden shelters actually make this problem worse. They trap body heat, cooking heat, and mechanical heat, turning the shelter itself into a glowing signal. History teaches us that the most dangerous enemy is often the one you don't see. Today, on Survival Logic, we're breaking down how people in the past and present learned to disappear not just visually, but thermally. This is about building what can best be described as a ghost shelter. A place that doesn't announce your presence to the silent sensors scanning the landscape. If this channel helps you think deeper about history, survival, and real-world preparedness, take a moment now to Media Group, Survival Logic channel, logo animation on white, hand pressing like button on YouTube, stock or distribute, equally, like this video, share it with someone who takes this seriously, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe to Survival Logic so you don't miss future breakdowns. Now, let's get into the real substance. To defeat thermal detection, you first need to understand what it actually sees. Thermal cameras don't detect people, structures, or objects. They detect temperature differences. A human body sits at roughly 37 degrees Celsius, which makes it stand out sharply against most natural environments, especially at night. The goal is not to make yourself cold, which is unrealistic and dangerous. The goal is to remove contrast. When your shelter matches the surrounding thermal baseline, it becomes just another piece of terrain. Problems begin when heat is allowed to collect and radiate outward in a concentrated way. Poorly insulated walls, exposed vents, thin roofing, and direct exhaust paths all create distinct thermal signatures that are easy to identify. Location is the first and most powerful layer of thermal defense. Throughout history, people who needed to remain unseen chose environments that naturally absorbed and confused heat. Deep forests with layered canopies break up rising heat plumes. Rocky terrain and earth banks absorb warmth slowly and release it evenly. Areas near water tend to have stable thermal baselines that make human signatures harder to isolate. The worst possible locations are isolated structures, open clearings, ridgelines, and anything that creates a sharp temperature contrast against its surroundings. Integration always beats isolation. This is a principle animals have followed for thousands of years, and it remains true today. The structure of a ghost shelter relies on layered thermal management. Inside the shelter, dense insulation slows heat transfer. Packed earth, natural fibers, dry organic material, and thick walls all reduce how quickly warmth moves outward. Beyond insulation, radiant heat must be addressed. Radiant energy travels differently than conducted heat, and reflective barriers facing outward can redirect that energy back into the living space instead of letting it escape. The outermost layer should be heavy, irregular, and thermally similar to the surrounding environment. Soil, stone, vegetation, and moisture all help the shelter equalize slowly rather than spike in temperature. The goal is to ensure that from the outside, The shelter never looks warmer than the ground around it. Ventilation is where most hidden shelters fail. Completely sealed spaces trap heat and moisture, eventually saturating insulation and creating a thermal bloom that stands out clearly. Effective ventilation doesn't remove heat quickly, it removes it quietly. Instead of venting upward, which creates a vertical heat plume, warm air should be routed laterally through buried channels, stone beds, or earth-filled trenches. As the air moves, its heat is absorbed by the surrounding mass and dissipated long before it reaches the surface. This technique was used in various forms by military forces and resistance groups long before modern sensors existed. Internal heat discipline is non-negotiable. Open flames produce intense thermal signatures and should be avoided whenever possible. Cooking and heating must be minimized, timed carefully and isolated from the shelter's outer shell. Heat sinks, such as stones warmed externally and brought inside, provide slow, controlled warmth without creating exhaust signatures. Mechanical systems, like generators, should never be operated near a shelter intended to remain concealed. Even residual heat can betray a location hours later. Camouflage must extend beyond appearance into behavior. A thermally invisible shelter behaves like its environment. Natural landscapes are chaotic. They contain warm patches, cool patches, moisture, shade and variation. Uniform temperature surfaces stand out. By mixing materials and textures on the shelter's exterior, sharp thermal edges are broken up. This principle was used extensively during the Second World War, when equipment was deliberately covered with earth and wet materials to reduce detectability. The same logic applies today. Testing is the final and most critical step. If you can observe your shelter with thermal equipment, you should. Scan it at different times of day and under different weather conditions. Heat behaves differently at dawn, midday, dusk and night. Any detectable hotspot is a flaw that needs correction. This process of refinement is what separates theoretical concealment from practical invisibility. Building a ghost shelter isn't about paranoia. It's about understanding how perception works and adapting accordingly. History is full of examples where survival depended on remaining unseen by evolving forms of detection. The principles remain the same even as the tools change. Control your signature, integrate with the environment, and verify your results. If you found this breakdown useful, subscribe to Survival Logic. Share this knowledge with others who value history and preparedness, and stay tuned for the next deep dive.